Greetings and welcome. My name is Aaron Craig with Let's Learn This Together, and this is part 10 of creating a beautiful inventory in GameMaker 2.3. Today we're going to be talking about sorting algorithms, and I'm going to show you how to sort your inventory by different attributes. And we're going to be doing that inside of this function, sort inventory. If you want, you can just download the finished project in the description below and play around with it. But for this video, I do encourage you to stick around and listen to me talk, because I'm going to be talking about sorting algorithms, complexity, and the trade-offs between time and space. And it's really important to have a basic understandings of algorithms and data structures, which I'm going to be touching on today. And also be sure to stick around to the end of the video for details on my beginner games course giveaway. So I am going to be adding a function to my inventory script. Now I am using GameMaker 2.3, which just means that my scripts are containers for functions. That's really about it. So if you're not using 2.3, just make a script with this name. We're going to call it function sort inventory. And I'm going to go ahead and press enter a bunch. And I'm going to pass in two parameters here, two arguments. It's going to be sort type and the grid, which actually we've done grid first on all of these. Let's go ahead and do grid and then sort type. Now, if you're not using 2.3, all you'll do is say var grid equals argument 0 and var sort type equals argument 1. And then everything else will be exactly the same. So let's get started on the coding. Now, we've already figured out what kinds of things we can sort by, and we have those inside of our obj items. Come back here, we have sort type. We have name, amount, type, and price. So if your items have more things that you can sort by, then you can obviously put those in and use them. The last one we have is height, and that's because the way we're actually going to sort it is just by pressing the S key. And when we do that, we're just going to say plus plus sort type, and then it's going to increase it by 1. And if we're at the height, then it's going to go back to the first one. That's just how that's going to work from a technical standpoint, which is why we have a height there. If you're not familiar with enums, they're just names for numbers and they start at 0. Okay. The first thing we got to do is convert our sort type into the type of things that we can actually find inside of our inventory, because the sort type here does not necessarily mean the sort type over here. You could potentially do that if you want, like put name and amount and type and price all in the same order, but I think that's kind of unnecessary and could get very confusing, especially with larger inventories with a lot of different item types. So instead, we're going to go ahead and convert sort type to item attribute. And the way we'll do this is with a switch statement. And we'll just say sort type. And we're going to say case sort type dot name. And we're going to say sort type then equals item dot name break. Now that should switch to a local variable unless I am typing something wrong. I've got a colon after case, and it's only after the full case that you want that. Okay, now let's do the rest of the cases. So sort type dot amount, that's going to be sort type equals item dot amount break. Case of sort type dot price, sort type will then equal item dot price break. Don't forget the breaks, because if you do, you will be in trouble. Last one is the type. Sort type equals item dot type break. Okay, looks like we got everything there. It's all coming together. Now, what we've got to do is create a temporary DS grid that we are going to sort, and then we're going to write over our original grid that we're passing in here. And that's because you can sort a grid in place, but there's trade-offs to that. It becomes more complex. And anytime you're talking about sorting or searching and you start talking about algorithms, the two things that you have to consider are space and time, which is complexity. So essentially, do you want to make something easier by using more memory, or do you want to make it more complex by using less memory? Because most of the time when it's more complex, there's more code, or at least the code itself is much, much harder to read and to understand. But if you use more space, it's a whole lot easier. So we have plenty of space. Writing another DS grid, even for 1,000 or 10,000 items, is not going to take up very much memory. So that's the route I'm choosing to go, and I think it's the smarter route when you are not restricted by something. All right, so we're going to create a temporary DS grid. So var sorted grid equals DS grid create. Going to start out empty. Height. And we also need to know which one is the lowest item while we're searching. And then we also are going to have saved items. So saved items. But GameMaker is kind of strange in the sense that you're not actually allowed to instantiate a array inside of the same time that you give it its name. So I have to do that, and then I can come down here and say saved item 0 equals undefined. These are going to be items we already got from the grid. Okay, this is just going to be an array of numbers. That way we know which ones we've already done. Now, here comes the complex part, is a nested for loop. So the first one is going to be using I. So I is going to be less than the width of the grid we passed in. So we're going to iterate over the grid through our I here, but we can't just iterate over it once, at least not with the sorting algorithm that we're using. We have to actually sort over it every time for each item in the grid to make sure that we've found all of them. So now we're going to say var j is equal to 0. J is less than ds grid width of grid and plus plus j. Now, be careful, because we've got 2 for loops and 2 local variables with them. So you've got to make sure that j is this for loop and I is up here. You cannot use the same variable, and if you mix them or at any point in this double for loop, it's going to blow up in your face. So keep that in mind. Now, item 1 is going to equal to grid hashtag lowest item sort type. So we start at 0, which is totally fine. We're going to start at the beginning of the grid. Then item 2 is going to be equal to grid hashtag j sort type. So item 1 is just checking the first item that we're at against all of the items as we iterate over the grid. So we're checking j. So we're going to go over the entire grid one time, and we're just going to say if item 2 is less than or equal to item 1, and we need to create another function here. It's going to be array contains saved items j is equal to false. Now let's go in and create this function. I can just do it right here, which is really nice. I'm going to say function array contains, and what this is going to do, I'll actually paste in the description so that you can read it. We just need to know if an array contains a specific number. And the reason we need to know that is when we are sorting through our grid, we don't want to have any you don't want to duplicate an item. Like if we're going through and we find that the third item in the grid is actually the lowest one, but we already saved the third item, then we want to skip over it. We don't want to even do anything with it. So what we're doing is we're saving. We have an array of all the items that we have already copied over, and this function is just going to tell us, hey, that one we've already saved, so don't even consider it. So all we have to do is pass in an array and a number, and this is just going to do a for loop. Var I is equal to 0. I is less than array length of the array, and if array I is equal to the number that we passed in, then we're going to return true. Otherwise, at the end, we return false. And that's all that that's going to do. So it just finds out if there's a number in the array. So up here, if both of these things are true, so item 2 that we're comparing, remember, item 1 is the one that has lowest item, so that's the one that we think is the lowest. And we're going to say if item 2 is actually lower than that, and we haven't saved it already, then lowest item equal to j. All right, Now we come down 2 parentheses, so outside of the second for loop, but we're still inside the first one. So end of inner loop. Now we're going to add that item to our sorted grid, because we already have the function written for that. So we add the item to the sorted grid, and that means we have to pass it in, because we don't have an easy function to get all the attributes that we want. So I'm going to say grid lowest item, item.name, and grid hashtag lowest item, item.sprite, and so on and so forth until we get all of them. Lowest. I'm just going to copy this lowest item bit because we're going to do that several more times. And then we need the item.amount. I'll bring it down here for item.type and item.price and item.object. And that's all inside of an array, so make sure you have a second bracket there and a parenthesis for the function of add item. Okay, we add the item there. Now, we're going to add to saved items, so this array that we are adding stuff to, saved items, I, because that's the one that we are actually on. So saved items I equals lowest item. So I is when we're iterating through the array one at a time, and we iterate j amount of times for every I. If that's not confusing, then I don't know what is, but listen to it over and over, type it out yourself, and it will make sense. Okay, so we're saving the saved items to we're saving the lowest item to saved items so that we don't ever copy an item that we already have. Now, find next lowest item. All right, we're going to do for var I, or no, we can't do I, we have to do a different one. Because if we reset I here, it's not going to work. So we're going to do var L equals 0. L is less than ds grid width of grid plus plus L. And now we're going to check the array contains again. And this part is essential, and this is what threw me off when I was first doing it, is I didn't have this in there, and it was overwriting items, and eventually I'd have just the same item. And the reason for that is if we start lowest item at 0 every time, or some kind of fixed number, then eventually that item will always be the lowest, and this will never trigger, and we'll just add the same item over and over and over. So what we have to do is find the next lowest item and set the lowest item to that. So if array contains saved items I, or L, so where we're already at, so the for loop that we're in, if it doesn't contain it, then we set lowest item equal to our L. And then once we got all of that sorting properly and it's all done, we have to actually copy and return. So we're going to say ds grid set grid region, which we've used this before. We're going to pass in the grid that we passed. The source is going to be sorted grid. We're going to start at the beginning, and we're going to go all the way over. So ds grid width of sorted grid, or it could be grid, doesn't matter. We're going to go all the way to the bottom with item.height. And we're going to start at the top left as well. So we're going to copy everything from sorted grid over to grid. And then we're going to destroy sorted grid and return grid. Are you ready to start making the game of your dreams? Then head on over to letslearnthistogether.com to check out my trilogy of courses to take you from beginner to expert. Game development is hard and frustrating when you're going at it alone and you don't have anyone to turn to. Join me on the journey and I'll be with you every step of the way to alleviate all of that frustration. And by the end, you'll be ready to make any game you can set your mind to. Go ahead and get started now at letslearnthistogether.com. Now I'm going to paste in the description and the parameters for this. And that should be everything that we actually need to know. So sort inventory is only referenced once. That is just fine. It's a function. Now we need to actually implement this inside and start calling it. So let's go back to our controller. We're going to create event, and up here, I'm just going to go ahead and say sort type is going to be equal to 0 to start, or you can give it a name. So like sort type dot name is also 0, but you can choose any of them except height. If you choose height, that's going to be a problem. Then let's go into the step event, and when we bring up the menu, we're going to call sort inventory immediately. So it's going to be our sort type with my, we switched those around. My items and sort type. And then we can just run this and we have it being sorted by name. So there we go. Let's check it out. We've got blue, jelly, broadsword, legendary crystal, mage's staff. Last one is small knife. Looks like that's working properly. Awesome. Now inside of the step event here, let's actually be able to add and change the sort based on what we press. So if is showing menu, so we only want to be able to do it while we're showing the menu. If keyboard check pressed ord of S, or any key you want, then we're going to say ++ sort type, and just check to see if we've gone too far. So if sort type is greater than or equal to sort type dot height, sort type will go back to 0, and then we call the actual sorting to make sure that we always call it with a valid type. So my items sort type. Now we should be able to actually see it in action. Okay, I don't see any problems, but the only thing is that we can't actually tell how we're sorting it. So we need to add in a little bit of information for the player. So let's go into the draw event, and at the very bottom, we want to actually do it after we draw the front of the sprite. We want to draw the sort type and let the player know how we're sorting it. So let's go draw set alpha for 1, draw set color for C white, and we're going to draw set the font for font smaller. Now if sort type is equal to sort type dot name, and the order here doesn't matter at all. We're just going to draw some text, and that's going to be at camera X plus 50, camera Y plus 425, and we are sorting by amount. Now I imagine I'm actually going to have to change some of these values, but let's go ahead and do this. So now we can do amount, price, type, and just change the actual word. So the first one is by name, amount, price, type. Let's run it. I think it's going to be a little too low or get in the middle of, oh no, that actually looks pretty good. Okay, so now we've got sorting by name, sorting by amount, sorting by type, sorting by price. Let's go ahead and move the camera X in. Let's do like 75. I think that would look better. And voila. We are sorting, we are displaying what we're doing, and I'm pretty happy with that. It's fairly complex, I will admit. Getting a good sort is very difficult to do. This isn't by far the most efficient, and it's probably not even the prettiest way of doing it, but I think it's probably the easiest way to do it, and that's unfortunate because it's still rather complex, but I hope this makes sense. If not, go over it again, or you can check out my Patreon for some one-on-one tutoring if you really are stuck and you want to be able to just talk to me and show me what you're working on, and I might be able to help you out there. So that's what I've got for you today though. In the next video, what we're going to be tackling is using items in an inventory. Now, I'm not actually gonna use an item like in a game because that's very game specific and I'm trying to be as general as possible, but we are gonna set up the little system of how to use an item and maybe a couple different ways of going about that. So on every GameMaker tutorial and video I put out from here into the future, I'm gonna be giving away one copy of my beginner game developer course, a great way to go from no programming experience to be able to make your own games. To be entered to win, just like the video and leave a comment showing me your keyboard works. You can leave a comment about anything. A week after the video is posted, I will send you a message with the coupon. If you want, you can use it for yourself, give it to a friend, or apply it towards a more expensive course by just sending me an email and letting me know that's what you'd like to do. If you want to see more content from me, then subscribe and ring the bell to be notified every time I put out a new video. But that's all I've got for you. So thank you so much for joining me, and as I always say, keep making, keep learning, and I'll talk to you later. A huge thank you to all of the awesome people who support me over on Patreon. Their names are on the screen now, and every dollar pledged helps me create more awesome content. You can support me for as little as $1 a month and get access to exclusive perks like my Discord server, your name in the credits, early access to my YouTube videos and courses, and more. Check it out at patreon.com/letslearnthistogether.com or find the link in the description below and become a patron today.